Okay, well, I will call us to order and try to at least get us started. And if Christine gets in, then she can always catch up by watching this portion of the video later on. Thank you all for coming. I know it's obviously very difficult to get this number of people all on a call at the same time, so I really appreciate the hard work of making that happen. The purpose of tonight is to allow commissioners who may not have been as involved in this project originally, or who not sit on the steering committee, to understand some more of the intricacies of the project. So we have the development team and DCHA, and most of our commission is here. So the meeting is being recorded, as I mentioned before, and it is open to the public through the link to watch the proceedings because of the Open Meetings Act. So with that, I am going to start with giving the development team an opportunity to kind of give an overview of the project, and then we'll go to Ms. High and anyone that she and Mr. William Jordan to talk about some of their issues and questions with the project. And then after a brief introduction by Commissioner Bass, we'll go to a Q&A session where we'll allow the commissioners to ask their questions and see where that takes us. So with that being said, and I'm not seeing Commissioner Miller yet, but Aspasia, I'm going to share the screen, and then you can go ahead and start giving the presentation. Just let me know. Hold on a second. There it is. Let me know when you need us to change the slide panels. Can everyone see it? Okay, please keep yourselves muted between.
Great. Thank you. Can you all hear me? And can you all understand me? Ms. High, I will count on you if someone cannot understand me to correct it. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you for having us today. This project has taken years to be where it is today, and we can never review enough the information. So what we're going to focus on tonight is pretty much give an overview of the project, talk about what happened with Bruce Monroe, the appeal, and how does that impact the phasing sequence, discuss about critical development items that are coming up, and then Andre Gould from the Housing Authority will discuss the relocation strategy and provide an update. So I'm going to go through the three first points. So we can go to the next slide. And if you see me looking this way, it's because I have another screen that I can see a little better. It's not because I'm shying away from you. So in this slide, first of all, our team consists of the community builders and Dante's partners. So together we are called Parkview Community Partners, PVCP. So if you hear that, this is the same parties. And our team was selected in 2014 for the redevelopment of Park Morton public housing. So what you see on this slide is what has always been the case. The Park Morton public housing being redeveloped in two sites, on the Bruce Monroe to the south of the Park Morton site, and then on site in Park Morton. And both sites will be developed as mixed income communities, in which we're going to deliver 90 Park Morton replacement units in Bruce Monroe, 43 in Park Morton's phase 1 phase, 14 in Park Morton's phase 2 phase, and then on both sides we're going to develop additional affordable housing units for DC residents. So not only replacing one-on-one the Park Morton public housing units, but also adding affordable housing units in the District of Columbia, all in a completely integrated mixed income environment. What has changed since we put this plan forward is how far along we have been in Bruce Monroe. And we had an approved PUD for the Bruce Monroe site in 2017, and an approved PUD plan for the Park Morton site at the same time. And there was an appeal filed on the Bruce Monroe site by a handful of abutters, which has resulted in a lot of delays on the project. So if it wasn't for that appeal, today we will not be talking about this. We will be talking about the ribbon cutting of the Bruce Monroe site, which would deliver 90 Park Morton replacement units and 111 additional affordable housing units. But unfortunately, for reasons beyond our control, the appeal has been filed. It's taken its steps through the courts. The latest and greatest of that is that the Zoning Commission, following the Court of Appeals decision, issued a procedural order and asked the parties involved to provide additional information on 6 points. And those were the things that the ANC, the Resident Council, and all the other involved parties, including our team, provided additional information to the Zoning Commission. So where we are right now is we're waiting for the Zoning Commission to review everybody's filings and let us know what the next steps will be. As a result of that, and because we have not advanced the Bruce Monroe site, we will be requesting an extension of the land disposition agreement we have with the District of Columbia. And that will be so we can actually address the Zoning Commission's questions and issues and finally move forward upon addressing those with the development of the Bruce Monroe site. But replacing one-on-one units in both sites, in Park Morton and Bruce Monroe, is what brings us to the one-on-one replacement of all the replacement units of Park Morton and our ability to add additional affordable housing units in the district. What has also changed is you see on the Park Morton Phase 2 on site, we are committing to developing affordable and market home ownership. And that is a result of the leadership and advocacy of the Resident Council of Park Morton, and it does have the support of the steering committee and the public partners. So that is something that will be happening on the Phase 2 of the Park Morton site. So also, just to be very clear, we will be having a ground lease at the end of the day and before we start construction on the Bruce Monroe site with the District of Columbia and on the Park Morton site with DCHA. And via the vehicle of the ground lease and also via the recorded covenants that are filed prior to construction, the affordability of all affordable units in both sites, both the Park Morton replacement units and the additional affordable units will run for the extension of that ground lease, which will be 99 years. So overall, the overall plan, the commitment to deliver quality homes for all people of all incomes in a fully integrated environment has not changed. The one-on-one replacement has not changed. What has changed is now that we can go to the next slide, because of the delays of the Bruce Monroe site, we are looking to advance the Phase 1 on-site phase that was always in the past discussed as Phase 2, because naturally by now we will have built the Bruce Monroe site. So on this slide that you see the Park Morton site in red is the footprint of the Phase 1 on site. And right now in this Phase 1 on site, there are 6 structures. 2 of those structures were vacant and boarded up even before our team got engaged on the project. And then there are 4 other structures that have some vacancies and they also have occupants. And the Housing Authority will discuss later about the relocation options and how we're looking to make sure that all 6 structures on that side are vacant so we can start making incremental progress towards delivering the affordable housing units. So the Phase 1 on site, which you can see in red, will deliver 43 Park Morton replacement units and 45 additional 60% AMI affordable units. And all of that stuff is exactly the same as approved in the PUD plan. Nothing on the overall delivery of the project has changed. What you can also see is that this plan has all new streets and alleys, all again as approved in the PUD, which means that during the construction period, we will be changing the existing public infrastructure, making better connectivity with Warden Street, connecting Park Road with the site, and upon construction completion, these new streets will be dedicated back to the city. And the way this works is you go through a legislative process, which we had the hearings a couple of weeks ago, and to get their approval to close certain parts of alleys and streets during construction only, not to close them now. And upon construction completion, dedicate them back. And the reason these things happen early on is because, like everything else, like the PUD process the work started in 2015 in order for us to have an approved PUD in 2017, in order then to be able to start advancing design and construction documents to move forward. So the legislative processes start earlier so the implementation work can happen when time comes. And the goal is to start, contingent to the relocation efforts that DCJ will talk about, the goal is to start construction on phase 1 on site next year. We also have filed for the raise permits for these 6 structures that are on phase 1. That also is a process that takes very long time because once you file the raise permits, there is a 13-step process. Your application goes through different agencies. It goes without saying that no one ever raises buildings before they're vacated, and actually it takes a substantial amount of time between the time a building is fully vacated and between we are able to actually get raise permits at hand in order to demolish. And the reason for these lengthy processes is because we need to test the buildings and see what level of issues they are, and then do an abatement through a third-party hygienist, and then submit the clearance letters back to the district, and then they're going to give us the raise permits. So it's a pretty lengthy, convoluted process. So these are the kind of things we start early. And another thing we have done the last couple of months is a geotechnical study. So we were on site taking soil samples. All of these things, again, need to be tested. We need to understand what is the consistency of the soil, and then this information is fed to our civil engineers and geotechnical engineers who design the foundation of these buildings. So you see some action happening earlier as we're gearing up to be in a position to start construction on site, contingent again to vacancies next year. And then on the phase 2 on site, this is where we will still deliver 14 additional Park Morton replacement units and 27 affordable and market home ownership townhouses. And then we can go to the next slide. And this is just a view of how the multi-family building, looking from Park Road down. So you see a little bit on the forefront, the multi-family building, and then on the background, the townhouses and flats that will be built as part of phase 1 on site. The first floor, very much like we had discussed at the PUD, has amenity space, both interior and exterior. There will be play areas, courtyards, all of that accessible, of course, for no cost to all residents of the building. And we are working with our team to advance the design plans and be able to file for the permits. Again, that is a pretty lengthy process, so we're currently at the 30% design development phase. And then when that gets completed, you go to the construction development phase, you get pricing, and we start moving towards being in a position to start construction. So that's all I had. I think the next slide is for Andre, and then I'm happy to take later questions, unless there is anything clarifying right now in your needs.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Andre Gould. I'm a senior development manager with the DC Housing Authority. I'll walk you through the next couple slides. As Aspasia said, in 2017, we had the PUD approval of both Bruce Monroe and Park Morton. And it was in the Bruce Monroe appeal happened a few months afterwards. In 2019, we got the HUD approval for the demolition and disposition, and we began relocation in November of 2019 of those residents. And in between that time, between June and November, our mobility team held workshops with residents so that they knew all of their rights prior to anybody moving off a site. They were given documentation of their rights as well, and told all the different options that they would have as far as relocation and moving, either staying on site, moving off site with a voucher, moving to other public housing, what it would be like to move with a private landlord, how to pay your utilities. There were various workshops that were held to educate the residents prior to relocation. And Aspasia has brought you up to date as far as the Court of Appeals decision at Bruce Monroe. Next slide. As you can see in the far left, the two vacant buildings that were actually vacant prior to these relocation efforts, and actually prior to the selection of TCB and Dante's. It was due to health and safety concerns that DCHA had actually relocated those residents in those buildings. There was poor vacancy in those buildings. So it was a natural place to begin a first phase on Park Morton. We always envisioned that once Bruce Monroe started, that we could actually begin on-site development at Park Morton. It's unfortunate that we're actually moving forward with Park Morton ahead of Bruce Monroe, but hopefully the Court of Appeals can work things out and we can get both projects moving. This lower chart actually indicates how the residents indicated where they wanted to move, who opted for a voucher, who opted for public housing. We actually had one resident that became a homeowner. That's the resident that relocated without subsidy in red. And you can see what buildings are partially vacant and what is completely vacant right now. So right now we don't have a completely vacant building except for those two buildings that we started with right now and the actual first phase on site. Next slide. This map actually just indicates, it's a little difficult to read, but it actually shows where residents have moved throughout the district and moved to various wards. And every move has been the residents' choice as to what they wanted to do as far as relocating within the city or public housing. So we try to work with them, and our mobility team that was formed as DCHA employees. We've worked with the residents as far as putting together a plan for each family as to what best fits their needs. Next slide. And Resolution 1606, which was passed in 2016 by DCHA Board of Commissioners, it pretty much added an extra additional layer of protections for residents and offered them the opportunity to return to a replacement unit for Park Morton. It was set in place for all new communities, and it sat there for all four of those communities and offers those rights for residents to return. Next slide.
Okay, I assume that does it for the development team at this point?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can all see one another again. And hold on one second. I do want to see if I can raise up a few more people. I'm assuming this is Commissioner Christine Miller. And we're going to try Teresa, one more, Commissioner Edmonston as well. Just keep yourselves muted for now, so thank you. And so then I'm going to turn to Ms. High and Mr. Jordan. And if you want to give some overview of, well, I'll leave it to you, but this is your time. Ms. High, are you still there? There we go.
Mr. Jordan, after you, please. I need a moment to compose my thoughts.
Good evening. Basically, we're here supporting Ms. High in the Park Morton Equity Plan, which we developed working with the resident council and some residents, listening to their needs. being a part of this process actually since 2014, before the development team was officially selected, and even prior to that. I will say that, so we're really just here to try to answer commissioners' questions. I think we've spoken many times about the equity plan and why we created, well, we created it. But I will say this, you know, we have to be careful because I don't want to speak for Ms. High, but generally speaking, and she'll clarify, we don't have very much confidence for anything that was just shared. Okay, this process is the second round of the same thing. So it's not that it started in 2014, it started in 2007. When things move forward to this new process, those of us who were involved asked that the issues and lessons learned from 2007 be carried forward so that we would not end up in this position. So the concern is that we have a project that placed the residents at risk because we went for a large project and didn't have any alternative plans. And so that's why we're here today. More than, as best we can tell, more than half the residents have gone without a bill first site, and that was the promise. You know, that there was a lawsuit is no excuse. We all knew from the beginning that a bill first site was needed, and the reason for a bill first site is because these relocation plans and processes that have occurred with Hope 6 and new communities have worked against residents actually returning, right? So we had a steering committee meeting, I think at the beginning of this year, where the representative from the Housing Authority bragged about a 35% return rate. Now, we don't see that as anything to brag about, but for them, that was something to brag about. What we just heard from both the Housing Authority and the development team are built around minimum requirements, right? So that what they're sharing are the minimum. And we found that shooting for the minimum generally ends up below the minimum. So the Park Morton equity plan was developed to fill in those gaps, to increase the odds that residents have their full choices. So to say now that residents had their choice to move is specious. It's not true. How can you have choice when the bill first site doesn't exist? That is not a new community's choice. That is a choice based on the minimum standards from the Housing Authority's relocation rules, okay? But that's not the promise of new communities. So there are two things in the Park Morton Equity Plan. One is we're looking for ways to repair the damage. The second is moving forward, we feel residents or their representatives or however it needs to be structured need to have a ownership, equity, a signature state in this project moving forward. So if LDAs have to be re-upped, not for the first time, but for the second time, then we expect resident or resident entity to be a signatory on that. By being a signatory on that, the residents have transparency into the entire process. They have ways to pursue their rights legally and in other means. So that's the point of the Park Morton Equity Plan in terms of the process. And then moving forward, the goal of new communities includes the economic integration of the residents of Park Morton into the larger community. That means there's an economic development element to new communities. It's not just you get an affordable unit. The idea is to get an affordable unit that positions families as they move forward in their lives. And that's the other element of the Park Morton Equity Plan. And we just borrow from self-sufficiency programs that are at the Housing Authority, other tools, and we just want it to all come together properly, including from all the partners. We want to maximize what DCHA has. We want to maximize the tools that the Housing Authority has. I mean, not the Housing Authority, but DNPED has. And we want the support of the ANC Commission to seek those maximized options, not the minimum, but the maximum. And that's the difference between what was presented previously, which is built around the minimum requirements and a track record of a 35% success rate. Therefore, you take the minimum, multiply it times 0.35, and that's what we're talking about. So it's actually less than 35% success rate, so probably closer to 15%. And so that's why the Park Morton Equity Plan is here. That's why we outlined it. If there are imperfections in it, then we challenge the agencies and the development team to close the gaps in that plan. Ms. High?
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Thank you, ANC commissioners, for taking time to allow us to do this Q&A. And thank you for all the guests for attending. I just want to take a moment to just speak on my community outside of this development, because, you know, I learned today that another one of my neighbors has moved. And to hear that, knowing that there's not any guarantee that they can return, although I'm hearing DCHA say that they have the right to return, but I've yet to see any documentation presented to me, the representation of Park Morton. What is the point in having a resident council or having representation of the people if you're going to completely ignore the people's council? What is the point in that? Why are you shutting me out and making decisions for the people and then presenting to me your decisions, and that's not the decision the people want? You know, when I presented the option to be able to own a home to the people, to my residents, they voted on it. And half of the people that wanted to be able to own a home, you all have vouched out of here without a guarantee to be able to return here. And half of the homes that were promised to them at Bruce Monroe are not even guaranteed now. That's off the table. And how are you going to produce the units that you promised? So speaking of being able to remain in our community, in order for us to have a foothold, and that's anybody, because Park Morton is a diverse community. The only Caucasian woman we had here, and we would fight for her, was Miss Patricia and her son Dakota. Like I said before, we have people from all over, all walks of life here. We had Asians, we had Blacks, we had a Caucasian lady, we have Hispanics. So y'all talking about integration, we already have that. We have different community incomes. We just don't have affluent incomes here. But in order for us to be able to remain, we need that equity. In order for y'all to stop pushing us out, we need the opportunity to own. And the only reason why y'all even gave us this opportunity was because I fought for it. So I am asking, I implore my ANC commissioners to support my Park Morton equity plan, not just for Park Morton, but for the city. Because if This was supposed to be the model. ANC, the NCI plan failed. The Park Morton Equity Plan will work if we implement it the right way. Support the people, support the residents, put them first, because you have to uplift the people in order for the chain to work properly. You have to oil the chain in order for the bike and the machine to run properly. And my residents and I, we love each other, and y'all are breaking up a family here. I've been here 19 years, and I was hoping to make it to 20 years, but y'all are breaking that chain. And be that as it may, I'm gonna fight to the bitter end. And I said that from the beginning. So again, with all due respect, thank you very much. I appreciate all the support from everybody who does support me and the residents. And for those people who do not support the Park Morton Equity Plan, please have a conversation with me. Let me know why you don't support it. Let's find some middle ground. Because I can work with you if you work with me. Don't just shut me out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. High. That was very helpful. I am going to turn it over to Commissioner Bass for just a brief, anything he would like to say, and then we'll get right into the Q&A.
Thanks, Commissioner Ray, and it will be very brief because I think that there are a lot of questions that people have had over the last couple months and through the discussions. And I also would like to thank everybody. You know, I thank Ms. High for your passion. I understand, you know, this isn't just a project to you. This is your life. These are your neighbors. We've never lost sight of that. You know, it's clear that the plan that we all worked on, if it were perfect, it would be built. I know some of us have had some concerns with parts of the equity plan, and this gives us all a great opportunity to, you know, have a conversation and figure out, you know, what will work and what won't, because I think we all want quality, dignified replacement housing that is not the state of the housing that's currently there. But I think this is a very helpful thing because, you know, Ms. High, you've lived there for 19 years. William, you've been in the community for a very long time and you've been very active. But when I think about the ANC commissioners and their experiences, there's only 3 of us that I think were on this commission back when this round of development and the conversations and the community meetings started. And that's myself, Commissioner Brown, and Commissioner Love Wade. For the rest of the commissioners, they know something of this, but they didn't live through it, and they don't know many of the details. And so that's why it's so important for us to be able to have this opportunity for everyone to just bring what they know to the table. Let's have a conversation, let's ask our questions, and let's see if we can't find a way forward. And I'll leave it at that because I think the importance here is the questions and answers.
Okay, thank you very much. So ANC, RSMD. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I had one comment, and that is this has been a very, very, very difficult project from the beginning. Since before 2007, actually, Mr. Jordan, we've been working to try to develop Park Morton before Clifton Terrace was even considered for redevelopment. And because of a number of issues, changes in administration, blah, 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 it never occurred. This latest iteration ran into a buzzsaw through the court system. Now, I'm just trying to be pragmatic on the whole situation. If the courts tell you you cannot do something, you cannot proceed as if they did not tell you you cannot do something. What it means is that you have to re-examine your whole plan, because if they put their foot down and say you're not going to develop this site as planned, then all of this discussion is really moot. What we really need to be focusing on at this point is on what we actually can do as a community, what can be done by the government, what can be done in support of the actions by the Advisory Neighborhood Commission. But we cannot change the situation as it currently exists. So I think our ANC proposed a resolution that supported the meat of the Park Morton Equity Plan, but was within the realms of what the law permits us to do and what we in consciousness, knowing all of the different aspects of these developments, can get behind. So how many of you have actually seen our proposed resolution?
So, yeah, Commissioner Wade, not everyone, that it was just a draft, and so I was waiting for people to have this opportunity before I distributed it, you know, broadly and then to the community. So not everyone has seen the draft.
Okay, so we'll get that out to them when, Commissioner
tomorrow.
Wade.
It'll be tomorrow. I just wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to get their questions. I don't want to. I don't want what I'm putting on paper to preclude people to ask the questions that they have. So that was my my thought. Yeah. Okay.
So we're not. Yeah. So I just wanted to say we're not ignoring the residents of Park Morton. I consider myself a part of Park Morton. I go back a little further than all of you. I was born in the neighborhood. My best friends lived on Morton Street. We went to Banneker and Parkview and Bruce School. So I know all of the neighborhoods and what we've gone through. So you're not just talking to someone who doesn't have a real passion for the people who have lived in there. And I've known families who died while trying to get this apartment complex to the promise that it was done by model cities. It goes back as far as model cities, guys. And they've been, and the residents have been really messed over. I want you to know clearly and unequivocally that the residents of Park Morton have gotten the short end of the stick throughout the city's housing development project. And it seems like something always comes up to derail it. Now this latest court order has actually derailed it. But we have to now consider what we can do to move forward and that will allow the best outcomes. I just have one more thing, which is a concern to me, and no one has addressed it as they talk about the development and the right to return. 2 apartment buildings on my block were converted to co-ops. And the residents were told that they would get first right of return. And they could return to the same kind of unit they had, like a 2-bedroom for a 2-bedroom. But I tell you, those apartments were so small that the people who had lived in those apartments did not want to come back. They would prefer to stay where they were. So I want to know, what is the size of the apartments? Are they comparable in size, or will they be miniature 2-bedroom apartments?
Can we go to a we'll go to Espacio, let her answer that question.
Yes, and I'm happy to send you after the call real numbers so you can distribute to the ANC, but they're not miniature, they're market rate apartments. There is no difference between the market and the affordable apartments in terms of finishes, sizes, design, anything. So there is a
right. That wasn't. Yeah, but that wasn't my question. He's asking
about the square footage as She's asking about the square footage.
Ms. Haya, I can send after the meeting the actual numbers. I had them the other day. The average for a 2-bedroom is close to 900. The 3 bedrooms, because their townhouses are larger, and the 1-bedrooms are about 700. But I would like to send you the actual numbers to be fully accurate. They're not small apartments. They're on the larger side.
Okay.
Okay. That's very important.
Okay. Good. No, and Dottie, I'm counting this against your time later. So did you have anything else before we move on?
I'm done.
Okay. Thank you very much. I do want to go in order. Commissioner Edmonston, you would be first given your SMD. Are you able to come on without blowing our eardrums?
How's that sound?
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I have a position on this, I just have a position. I understand, you know, this is a project that started way a long time ago. And I may not have been on the commission, but I certainly understand starts and stops and fits when it comes to this kind of thing. My building, the project started in 1997 and we closed in 2020. So my position is, what I hear is a community asking to be included in the decision-making process. That's all I hear. The project, they want some agency and some self-determination and just a seat at the table. That's what I hear. And it's not, you know, the project, the fact of the fits and the starts is should be a starting point to maybe think about something. Okay, let's do something different. Let's be part of this new society where we're talking about an equitable and a just and inclusion. You know, I don't even understand why they have to beg to be part of the conversation. For me, I don't understand that. So that's my position. It's more of a moral position. It's a social justice position. It's an equity position. You know, these are folks who never had any agency. This is a David and Goliath fight. And right now, you know, against the backdrop of the conversation that maybe we can think about doing some things differently, I think now's absolutely the right time. And just the last thing I'm gonna say is to piggyback on what Dottie said, is to go back and see what we can do to reimagine this thing. You know, what's doable and what isn't, but at least let them be there because it's their homes, it's their community. You know, what I heard in Sean's voice was quite something, you know, community and the loss of it, Pardon me. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Moving on to Commissioner Miller.
I just want to start off by saying I'm very glad I get to go after Commissioner Love-Wade and Commissioner Edmondson, because I think they really articulate it far better than I would have. I think the goals and the principles under the Park Morton Equity Plan are something we need to strive for. And I think, as Commissioner Edmondson identified, this is what we need and this is what we want for our community. We need that self-determination. We need that agency. And this is what we are here to lift up. I think the asks are very simple. We need to identify those. We are looking for, what is that, you know, the build first alternative look like. You know, the only thing I can possibly add is that moving residents without a build first option is a failure on behalf of our city. And I think we need to recognize and identify that. And I think we need to come to the table. We need to come up with solutions. They may be complicated, but I think the asks are very simple. I wish I could go after Commissioner Brown and others, because I think that they have better questions on this. And I certainly have more questions, but I think in the interest of time and sort of getting us through what we need to accomplish and what we ultimately want to achieve, I think it's pretty simple. We want a safe place for residents. If that's the REN, if that's achievable, then that's what we do. But ultimately, we need an alternative. I think, you know, we need to phasing in this secondary part. I have a lot of questions about that. I don't understand why we're piecemealing it. If phase 1 isn't working, then phase 2 is what we have, and we need to make that the best and most complete. And I have a lot of questions around that. And finally, I have a lot of other questions, but I know we're all under limited time, so I'm going to let everybody else ask.
Well, I want to turn what you just said into 2 questions then, and the the team can decide how they want to do this. Can you talk at all about relocation to other properties? I hate to use a specific property, but as it was said, the Wren was brought up. And then also, I think it's important to talk about the residents' ability to stay on site if they don't want to leave, which as I understand is their option. So Spasia or DCHA?
Yeah, that will be for Andre. Andre, you're muted.
Yeah, I can take that one. The residents do have that option to move on site to the phase that that wouldn't be part of on-site redevelopment. We're actually currently preparing some units that are vacant on that part of the site, so that it, they're as close to new when they move in, and they can stay there until there's an on-site development built, and they can move into the new development once it's built. And the residents are making that choice to relocate on site if they want to.
And Mr. Gold, anything on the use of other properties? As I understand, there's a lot of complexity there. Can you enlighten us at all about what it takes to relocate someone to another property?
Mostly that's utilizing the voucher that they have to move to those properties, and they have that option to take the voucher and move to whatever property they choose to move to.
Commissioner Ray, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna assume I have a little bit more time. How many residents in total and remaining are we looking at in the Park Morton site? I think that, again, we've, as Ms. High has identified, a lot have been moved off site. So how many now remain at the Park Morton site that will need to be moved to a swing space or other identified site?
I don't know if we want to pull the slide back up, but it indicates how many residents in that phase have moved already and how many need to be moved, that first phase on site.
I will endeavor to. So if we zoom in.
In the chart.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Is this the one?
Yes.
Yes. Can someone walk us through it just briefly?
Yep.
Sorry.
So prior to relocation, there were 130 families on site. And at phase one, there were 44 families. And it indicates lower how many families have are remaining to be relocated. It's 22.
Then why does it
So
say?
you said right there there are only 20.
Oh, no, one at a time. Let's start with Christine and then we'll go to Dottie.
I'm sorry, I see 69 families remaining to be relocated. Now, everybody knows math isn't my strong suit, not because I can't, because I don't have a calculator. And I'm looking at your numbers. Why does it say 69 families remain to be located and you're telling me 22?
Because it would be 69 families total on site.
Right, that's what I'm asking, total. We don't want to phase our families out. We're talking about a total of what, just so we can wrap our minds around what that looks like.
So we're not focusing on those other 47 families. It would just be the 22 to get started with on-site
So
redevelopment.
47 would remain in housing that is substandard.
If they choose.
How
Okay,
many
that's
are
all I
living
asked.
right now?
Thank you.
How many are living right now on the Park Morton site? How many families?
It would, if I'm looking at this, it looks like 69.
Yeah.
69.
Yes.
22
So
of them. Sorry.
we're talking about no more than 70 families in total to be relocated for this project to be through fruition. Not counting the families that have to come back. We're talking about the ones that are going to be directly impacted by the demolition.
Correct.
Michael, I don't want to hopscotch my turn, but can I ask a specific question related to this?
Sure.
If I'm reading this chart correctly, in phase 1, they list 22 families that need to be relocated for phase 1. A total of 69, but phase 1. And we're talking about phase 1 is the demolition and the new building. Based on my communications with the Housing Authority and DEMPED, it's my understanding that there are 17 empty units not in phase 1. So just as a base, what would it take to make sure that those 17 units are in good repair, decent housing, you know, no diminishment in amenities, so that those 17 could accommodate at least 17 of the 22 and make sure that there's no displacement with the 17? Because I think if we're talking about equity, displacement, community, then the number one quality choice should be an empty unit that's not getting demolished in phase 1. And then the second part of that I would like an explanation to is when I look at this chart, I don't understand when I compare it to the chart or to the map on page 4, where in page 4, the red outlined area is what's considered phase 1. But when I look at this chart with the hatched lines, that phase 1 is a larger footprint and it includes 3 more buildings. So I want to know why those are included in the phase 1 relocation strategy when they're not included in the phase 1 redevelopment strategy. If you could speak to that.
Okay. I guess the first part of your question, those 17 other vacant units, that is our plan, to get those units in the best shape for a family to occupy if they choose to stay on site. We're gonna start that work hopefully before the end of October and get those units ready. The second part of your question is that we had a phased demo dispo application, and it included the entire hatched area and then the entire pink area. It was 2 phases. And part of that was so that we would have the ability to create the new road from Park Road at some juncture. And we decided to, if residents chose, to use the voucher in the first phase hatched area if they chose.
All right, I think that answered Commissioner Bass's question. I do want to move on to give Commissioner Robarczyk an opportunity. If Commissioner, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I sort of like Commissioner Miller was talking about, you know, obviously I was not part of this early on, and it's been a learning, steep learning curve this entire time. So for right now, I would love to hear from the other commissioners who, like Commissioner Brown, Commissioner Bass, who have been part of this for longer, to hear their questions to see if those answer what I'm wondering about. I know it's been discussed multiple times, but I would like to know a little bit more about the history of how residents have been screwed in the past, like Commissioner Love-Wade's talked about. And just in general, I know, you know, we're discussing residents having the option to use vouchers, but like, what does that process, and maybe Ms. Hyde can talk about this, but what does that process actually look like? What is the choice quote or unquote look like, you know, just for my better understanding too.
Ms. Hyde, do you want to address that at all?
Sorry, my cat was meowing and I missed the last part of the question. Can you repeat the last part?
Yeah, I'm just wondering firsthand from your neighbors that you're seeing, like, what does this relocation process actually look like for families and neighbors that are living there? What is the choice, quote or unquote, of a voucher look like for residents and your neighbors?
Okay, so for some of them, the process was horrifying. I don't want to call any names because I don't know if she's comfortable with people knowing who she is yet. So I have to get clarification from her first. But one of the tenants who moved with a voucher was relocated to Southeast. She was, the moving experience was awful because she was rushed out of her apartment. The moving crew, one of the guys from the moving crew actually took her television to his personal home on his truck. And they had to, I guess somebody from housing had to make that man bring her television back. So that was a nightmare for her. And she put this in writing. So I have that in an actual email. Okay. So once I get clearance from her to share it with you all, I can happily share that with you all. So another resident, she had an okay move, but her apartment is nice, but the neighborhood, they're shooting all the time. So she doesn't feel safe. Others, they're okay. They're not really speaking about their experience too much because they're scared of the retaliation. They've seen what DCHA has put me through, speaking on my own experiences. I haven't relocated, but fighting for my residents, I've been a target. So residents seem to not want to speak up about their experiences because they feel that if they speak up, their housing is not safe. They didn't want to really speak up when they were living here at Park Morton because their housing wasn't safe. So I had to keep referring them to lawyers and stuff like that. We just had, and Ms. Rios actually contacted Empower DC and gave them a statement and contacted a lawyer to be protected, and she is not happy where she is because now she's taking a voucher and she has utility bills now. So she's like, I made the biggest mistake of my life. So this is what I'm saying. I've been saying this all along. Everybody's income cannot sustain a voucher. This was a senior woman living on disability or Social Security, maybe both. You know, now, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to check my frustration because, you know, they keep pushing this voucher, and everybody's income is not in a place where they can sustain a voucher. And they're not telling people that when you move out there with a voucher and you allow your utilities to get disconnected, you will lose your voucher. Your utilities get disconnected, you will lose your voucher, which exacerbates the homelessness problem. And if y'all don't believe me, you can contact Miss Denise Blackson, who works at the Office of the People's Council, because I held a Zoom, not a Zoom, a Uber conference meeting with my residents who called in, and she told them, we have a lot of people on vouchers coming in here to get assistance to pay their utilities by the Office of the People's Council. So there's that problem. So if I'm going to be out there in the world having to struggle and pay my bills, I want to make sure that I can own it in the end, that my kids are secure in their housing. Because what DC Housing Authority has put me through, I've already been homeless in this city with my oldest daughter. I'm not going through that again. I'm not going to go out there in those streets with my children. I would much rather struggle and make sure that my name is on it and I own it, and that my kids will always have a place to live if anything ever happens to me, because DC Housing Authority made sure that when they remove, I don't know the exact name for it, but the term of endearment that we use is the grandfather program, where if the head of household dies or becomes deceased or anything was to happen to them, anybody over the age of 18 that is on the lease can inherit the apartment. They've since removed that clause and literally just put our kids in a situation where if I had to die permanently last year when I got hit by that car, my kids would have been out of here. There would have been no telling where they would have ended up. I have a 20-year-old that would have been taking care of a 5-year-old. So that's where we are.
Okay, yeah, I see Mr. Jordan is raising his hand, so we'll go to him here, and then back to Mr. Grabarczyk.
Yeah. So I wanted to make 2 points. You know, our goal with the equity plan is not to take away people's option to use a voucher to do whatever they feel is best for their family. However, the whole purpose of New Communities was to take that stress off the table, right? That's why the critical thing about the bill first sight is, one, you would keep people together, and then you would be better able to deliver the human capital supports that go with New Communities, right? As well as they have each other to rely on to better position themselves and stabilize themselves. This is one of the key purposes. So when we start hearing about vouchers, again, this is back to the minimum, right? So scattering people with vouchers is why Hope 6 and early New Communities did not return a large percentage of residents. Because after going through all of that and finally getting yourself stable, and then 10 years later, this site calls you up and say, do you want to come back? Of course, most people are going to say, no, I figured it out by now, right? So again, you know, just keep in mind that this has to be repaired. And then I want to call quick attention to that chart so that you understand what Ms. High has to deal with. So there's a chart, someone asked the questions, how come the demolition area doesn't match the phasing for development? What's going on here? So imagine if you saw that map and you live there. So they're telling you we're going to only do these buildings over here to the left, but then you look on the map and your building is shaded to be demolished. And then they will tell you, well, what we wanted to do is we went to HUD and got blanket permission to demolish more than we needed so we wouldn't have to come back. But what does that tell you as a resident? You're on a vicarious position because they have authorities and you have no checks and balances. Similar to the alley closing, right? So everybody says we need it now and all this kind of stuff. But that is a check and balance where we, the community, the residents, the ANC, always have a chance to check and balance what the housing authority is saying. We looked at the chart of when people were leaving, how many people left, how many gone, what's in what phase, and you saw that the numbers add up, but they don't add up. right? So how can you plan your life? And you just showed me 3 things that don't add up in an environment that has already failed. Can you imagine living in that stress? So again, this is why our positions is what it is, and what is being shared is just not good enough, and why we need alternatives.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to Commissioner Robarczyk to see if he has any other questions.
Thank you, Bill. I have more for later that I'm sure we're going to touch on, but I guess Mr. Jordan just brought up alternatives, and I know there have been a lot of discussions about, I know the REN was already brought up, and I've seen the letters and listened to the council hearings, and, you know, I'm wondering what other options there are besides that, that could be discussed. But I'm sure that's going to be brought up later. So thank you for your time.
Well, no, I am curious, or maybe we need to hear from the development team. Are there other options? I mean, right now, as I've been hearing it, the residents' options are they take the voucher and face the difficulties that we've heard about. They could stay on site. They could move to another DCHA housing authority property. Are there other options that this team feels could be explored? The development team could feel.
For the relocation options, I think Andre can jump in and clarify. I do want to clarify one point that came up just so we are all looking at the same information. We have submitted raise permits only for the 6 buildings included on the phase 1 footprint. And that is public information. Everybody got the notification on this. I think what Andre was trying to explain earlier is that when they submit this application for demolition disposition to HUD, they did it in a way that gives them enough vouchers. So if people want them, they can have them, because I think it was something regulatory, but for our purposes and how we're actually raising buildings, I think there is incredible clarity on the fact that it is only 6 buildings. But any other questions around relocation options, Andre is the right person.
Okay. Mr. Gould, any thoughts on that? Are there other options?
As far as relocation options, no. Besides other public housing or using your choice to take your voucher to move to private market, those are the only options at this time.
Okay. I am going to move on then. Commissioner Bass, it would be you're next in order.
Mercy. Okay, I can go. So to pull this thread a little bit more, since the raise permit is only for the 6 buildings, but the blue hatched includes, depending upon how I look at the footprint, 2 or 3. And maybe Andre, you can speak to this. The 3 buildings that are not eminently going to be demolished, is the housing authority actively trying to vacate those buildings, or do the residents who live there, do they get to stay until a later phase of the development? I think that one's important to me. I could understand why there might be a desire to put that road in, but that works if Bruce Monroe is under construction or completed. I don't think it's necessary now. And so I just want to know the status of those 3 buildings. Like, are there currently efforts to encourage residents to move, or are they going to be possible to keep residents in the community? And possibly, since all 3 of them are partially vacant, do they help us with an on-site alternative?
Let me make it clear. We are not forcing anyone to move. It is their choice if they choose to move. I was just trying to explain what the thought process was for the hatching or the phasing for the demo dispo application.
No, I understand that, and I don't want to I'm not suggesting you're showing up at people's doors and dragging families into the street in the middle of the night, and so don't take it that way. What I'm suggesting is you have a two-phase strategy for vouchers, and 3 of the buildings are in phase 1. The rest of the buildings are in phase 2 of the ones we're discussing. And so because phase 1 has a higher priority where buildings need to be vacant for the project to move forward, but those 3 buildings aren't necessary for the phase 1 part to move forward. I'm just wondering, let me ask you this. Are those 3 buildings being treated as phase 1 buildings, even though they're hatched that way, or are they being treated as phase 2 buildings?
They're phase 2 buildings.
Okay, so, I mean, even though I think you're trying to be transparent with the hatching and how it relates to the vouchers, they could easily be pink hatches instead of blue hatches because there's no need for those buildings to be vacant at this time.
Correct.
Okay, and then when we had the email back and forth a while ago, and I got the number that there are currently 17 vacant units. Do those include units in those 3 buildings in phase 1?
I would have to confirm that information. I'm not sure exactly what location those units are in.
Okay, because I would like if the 17 units are in the pink hatched area and we have 3 partially filled buildings in a blue phased area that aren't going to be demolished, maybe they were overlooked because they're hatched in that way. But I guess what I'm getting at, and I've already kind of made this point, if we have vacant units on site, and if the goal is to keep our neighbors in our community, I think, for me personally, if it resulted in vouchers not being used because residents and our neighbors are staying in the community and don't have to be displaced, I'm perfectly okay with a voucher not being used. I understand it's the residents' decision, and I'm not making that decision for them. But I seriously want staying on site to be a viable decision, a good decision, not a decision that would be regretted. And I think that until those buildings are demolished, every one of those units has to be in the highest state of repair and a decent place to live. I'm not saying they're not, but we know what we've heard, and we know that some units that are vacant for a long time, there's a reason they're vacant. So I just need to say that. Another thing I'd like to get at is, because I think there's disagreement on this point. I've heard various things from various people, and so I'd kind of like a discussion on this from all parties. And that is, currently there's an approved PUD for the Park Morton site. It wasn't challenged. There's no one trying to renegotiate it, as far as I know. The Bruce Monroe site was challenged. It was vacated. It went back to the Zoning Commission with, I believe, 7 specific things that the commission has to address. It's my understanding that those 2 PUDs are still very much in force, or there's a high probability that they will stay, and that what I would like to know is, one, are they still intact, or did the remand upend it? Some have told me that it means we're starting over. I don't believe that's true, but I do think we need to discuss it. And to Ms. High and William, since I think you would contend that your plan would fit the timeline of anything that has to happen because of that remand, I do ask a question because I am deeply concerned about this. If fully implementing your ideas in the Park Morton equity plan and hashing out the areas that just don't work to find a way to do it, if it added 5 additional years to delivery of housing, is that okay? Like, if it adds significant time to delivery of quality housing, is that acceptable? Yeah, go ahead, William.
Okay, so of course, adding 5 years is unacceptable, right? Again, the residents will ultimately have to make that choice, but no one wants to add 5 years to anything, right? So the issue, the issue at hand is, one, we don't believe what we're asking. So what we're asking is that the first building basically be cut into 2 pieces, right? That you you focus on building on the space where the buildings are already empty, right? And adjust plans accordingly, deliver that, right? Or at least make significant progress in delivering that before you do anything else. Because what that would do is, one, mean that we don't necessarily, nobody else pretty much has to be relocated at all. Then it's a real choice, because people are making a choice. Do I want to wait 2 years or whatever the time it is to construct that particular building? They can actually make a concrete decision on what they're doing. 2, it would build confidence that this team could actually get something done, right? So, and then of course, 3, our position is, our proposal, of course, we want that first building to be a cooperative, right? So that was mentioned earlier. And so because that first building is a cooperative, the residents would have standing, would have an equitable position because it was being built as a cooperative. So could that add some time to the process? Probably architecturally and all of those kind of things, but we just heard they're at 30%. So they would have to get new drawings at 30%. They would probably be a request to zoning to let them know that there's a change. I think zoning has this thing called, what's it called? A change of consequence or something of that nature that doesn't require full hearings, that we may qualify for that. But I think our ask is that that's what we want to see. And if the projections that, of course, we would have reviewed by independent parties say it's going to add 3 months, then we would probably be for it. 6 months, we would probably be for it. 2 years, probably not. That's too much. That's basically staying with, where we are with no gain. The goal is to gain from the process, is to strengthen the residents' position as an equitable position at the table kind of thing. So we don't want to break even. We want to advance their position. So I don't know what the trade-offs are. No one's presented them.
That brings up a point that I think the development team should get a chance to talk to, and that is, if you change the first building to a cooperative, I imagine that changes the financing and the affordability for everything else, because I believe a cooperative was something that was considered in the beginning, but was ultimately not selected because of the financing. So is there anyone on the call that can at least talk to that, the cooperative portion right now?
So I would like to respond on the design portion and on the cooperative portion. The phase 2 PUD is not an appealed PUD. And if we move forward, we can start construction next year. If we redesign, the existing PUD is very fixed. It is a new redesign process. And I do want to remind everybody that we were awarded the project in 2014. We started working with everybody and we had an approved PUD in 2017 and we were not appealed. Nobody can guarantee today that even if we decide today that 3 years is fine and we start this process tomorrow, nobody can guarantee that someone else who is not in this group will not appeal this new PUD, because then there will be yet another idea that someone will say you didn't think 3 or 4 years ago. So this idea that we can just simply redesign is not accurate. What will mean is many years of delays and some level of unpredictability that nobody without a crystal ball can tell you what it is. As it relates to the financing and everything else we discussed, I do know that it has been mentioned, the bare minimum. This is not the bare minimum. This is not only replacing one-on-one units, this is bringing many additional affordable units for district residents. This is not just one-on-one and then cashing out on like market rate stuff. This is from all projects of public housing redevelopment we work around the country. This is one of the most progressive, ambitious plans cities have put forward. So I do think it is very important to clarify that point. And because of that, there is a very complicated balance of bringing in equity and debt and a lot of other stuff to make this possible. So to convert this to a co-op without having something in the market that is cashing out on the project is not possible, unless the District of Columbia had its own programs that, you know, if that is the case. We haven't heard of them, we haven't seen them. And so starting something like that guarantees not only years of delays, but the uncertainty of even ever building it.
Okay, thank you. And that gave me the answer. I'm going to go back and check. Commissioner Bass, did you have anything else?
No, if there's time at the end and anything else comes up to me, I will ask it. But that's kind of like, those are the two things that were top of mind right now. I wholeheartedly think anything and everything we can do to provide opportunities for residents to stay on site, that needs to happen. And I'm critically concerned about delays. You know, where adjustments can occur that don't create delays, fine. But you know, when you have, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to skip myself and go to Commissioner Brown, who's been patiently waiting. Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners, for pulling this together. And thank you to the New Communities and Housing Authority teams, as well as William and Ms. High. I definitely appreciate you being here, sharing your updates and also your ideas. And as you know, this ANC supported the redevelopment project to provide support a plan that provides quality housing for Park Morton residents and to ensure that there's no net loss of subsidized units in the neighborhood. And we really supported that the Build First site, especially at Bruce Monroe, to provide an opportunity for there to be housing for residents prior to demolition. And I mean, that really was to avoid displacement at all costs. And I'm very concerned that our residents are being displaced. It's disheartening to see what the residents are going through. And so I definitely hear concerns, Ms. High. I want to go back to what Commissioner Bass mentioned earlier, and he talked about the demolition and the phasing on the site, because I remembered this was raised during our steering committee meeting, and really just wanted to explore opportunities for residents to remain on the property during the phasing and demolition of the site. You know, it just seems like the relocation is happening really quickly, and I'm not sure that we're looking at all opportunities or options for residents to stay in Ward 1, and as well as Park Morton site. So there are vacant properties that are there. Residents are relocated throughout the city. And I just wanted to learn a little bit more about the thinking around that and what opportunities you can provide for residents to remain on site at this time.
And I think the basic answer or answer that we've given before is to make sure that we maintain those units in that phase 2 on site, so that residents that choose to stay on site can live in a a safe and sanitary unit. And that's our goal, is to continue to do that and make those units available for those residents.
But is there a chance that that could be done during the phasing of this project while on site?
That's our goal, to start work on those vacant units in that phase 2 area, hopefully before the end of this month.
So residents can remain on site while this is happening?
That's correct.
Sorry, Commissioner Brown, did you have another question?
I do, but go ahead.
No, I just wanted to clarify. In terms of costs, moving a resident, do they suffer any kind of cost in terms of the relocation? And then when they do choose to return, how does that work too? I mean, are there any costs associated to the resident with those moves?
When they move off site as well as move back on site, their moving costs are covered, as well as any reconnection of cable or telephone. Those costs are included as well. We try to make it as easy as possible. We hire professional movers. I was a little disheartened by what Ms. High told me. I would actually like to talk to her online to find out more particulars about that case, because we try to make sure that we use professional movers. So we need to look into that case to make sure something like that doesn't happen anymore.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Brown, so back to you.
Yeah, I just didn't want to lose sight of residents, the opportunity for residents to remain in Ward 1 in the neighborhood, that we're looking at all options as much as possible within the current stock of housing available for them. And so I just think during this time that we really consider, what the residents are going through in the middle of this pandemic, moving them to all areas of the city, really just kind of honing in on that. And any details of what plans you have for doing that is going to be critical for us, because we really, this plan was to avoid displacement at all costs. And I think that, the Housing Authority can really do something about that. And if they're saying that they don't want the vouchers, or if they're saying that they want to stay on site, which is what they're doing, they're protesting. I don't, know the practices of the Housing Authority and what's happening on the site. But I think that now is the time to really, provide the ANC with some information, steering committee with some information, because, Ms. High has shared the experiences of the residents, and we've been reading about it. So I just really want to kind of press you guys on that. And looking at the current stock of supply that we have in the ward. And right now, from what I've seen in your presentation, the numbers look really low for Ward 1. And I just kind of, we just need to learn a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Love-Wade, any questions that the presentation has generated for you?
Yes, I did have questions about the residents who are there now and who might be able to move into the phase 2 buildings temporarily. They will then be allowed to move back to a fully remodeled unit once phase 1 is open, correct? And then those units they're in will be demolished and built, right?
That's what we're being told, Miss Love-Wade, but every time we're told one thing, we're brought back to the
I'm
table.
asking yes, ma'am, that's why I'm asking that's why I'm asking the officials now to clarify it. Those 17 units, if the residents who are there now opt to stay on the site and not relocate and not use their vouchers, but move to the phase 2, 17 units you said that you were going to refurbish and make sure are in proper working standards. living standards.
That's
So
correct.
are those people then allowed to go back to the new apartments once they're available? Or will they have to stay over there in the refurbished apartment?
So there's a relocation plan that was put together, and it has a hierarchy of reentry criteria that the residents put together. And we can share that plan with you as well, as far as the criteria and how that lays out, so that once a new building is built, we'll go through that criteria for residents having a first come, first served basis into those buildings, what that criteria is.
Okay, that's something that Ms. Hyde, you and your tenant association signed on to. So is that correct?
We did do that, but I felt like it was unfair. I mentioned that during the meeting. I said,
I know, but kind of like negotiations go like that. And if it's an agreement, I'm sorry, but you know, that's how negotiations kind of work. You get some of what you like, but not all of what you like.
They brought it to us. I had to schedule a meeting. NCI brought it to my residence, and they put paper all over the wall that had these options, and they just presented it to the residents and just broke it down and said, this is how it's gonna work. Okay, they didn't say, is this what you want? They didn't present it like that. They said, this is how it's gonna work. These are the options. And then they just said, vote on it. Here are some index cards. I can write down, you know, are you going to choose the families or the seniors? Who gets priorities? Do seniors come back? Do families come back? Do people who have seniority get preference over people who have, you know, like that? So we had to pick and choose, and I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't think it's fair, you know. But we had to do it, and so they counted up the votes, and that's how they came up with the tally over who gets to come back.
But there was a process. I mean, I can't speak on the process. I just wanted to make sure that that everybody agreed, however it turned out. Like, we getting ready to go through some mess like that now. You know, we all know this. So we just have to try to make sure we make the best decisions. And then I'm trying to make sure that you guys are covered.
Their process, and then they brought it to me. They always make decisions, and then they bring it to me, and I have to just present it to the residents. And I'm telling you, before I became resident council president, I was fed a script. That's why I was at the DC City Council hearing saying, yeah, I'm fully on board. Yes, I'm fully on board. I didn't know that the deal was already done the way it was done. When I became resident council president, and I became on the inside, and I got to see what little bit I can see, they didn't even let me see the deal that the president had signed, the president before me had signed. I was supposed to see all of those documentations. They did not let me see any of that. They told me, Ms. Hyde, we're gonna put a transition team in place, and you're gonna start out with a clean slate. So I've been fighting from the ground up to try to find a way to make this whole thing work for the residents.
Okay, I know Commissioner Brown had her hand up. I want to get that, and then I'll double check. Commissioner Brown.
Yes, and I want to explore the right to return, and I appreciate the resolution that was mentioned in the presentation earlier. Jessica, can you just share a little bit more about that process, what that looks like?
So Andre will be the right person for it. It is a DCHA resolution that we, the developer, are adopting. So when people are coming back, it talks about not only the right to return, but on the fact that we are not gonna impose extra criteria. So Andre, I think you are the right person. It's a DCHA document.
And Aspasia is correct. The resolution, this slide just gives an overview that it's an opportunity for residents to return, but we could provide the actual resolution, and it speaks to the fact that there will be no screening, no additional screening, no criminal backgrounds. It's no screening above what DCHA currently does. And it's just to make sure that it's a fair, even ground for anybody that's returning to an NCI project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Brown, was that your question?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Loveway, did you have, oh, okay, I see Tanya shaking her. Okay, Tanya, do you want to go ahead?
I just also want to make sure that everybody understands that the council member introduced that resolution at the city council to codify it, to make it district law, so that there is no way that anyone can renege on the right for anyone to return to public housing. And no one can impose different barriers, and no one can change any of the parts of this agreement to make it difficult for people to come back. I just want to make that 100% clear. We are adopting this as a law in the District of Columbia.
Okay, thank you, Tanya Jackson, Chief of Staff to Councilmember Nadeau, since we didn't introduce her before. Commissioner Loveway, did you have anything else before I move on to Commissioner Clark? Okay, I'm going to move on to Commissioner Clark.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all,
I'm sorry, I didn't know I was on mute. I just had one little final question, and that was, are there families still moving into Park Morton now? I understood that apartments were still being rented.
It looks like everyone is shaking their head, Dottie. No, no one has moved in probably for many years.
No more leasing up.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Clark.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to say I don't know much about this project because I live in the opposite corner of the ANC. I apologize for that. I do want to say though that we don't want to lose any kind of sense of community. Right, I'm very torn. With many lower income residents living in dedicated buildings in my SMD, I see the need to have better amenities identified by the residents, and renovations to create modern floor plans are maximizing the space in more innovative ways. Quite often, as in this case, I think redevelopments do increase the unit size and density by building higher, making the best use of and maximizing habitable space. I do feel that more equity can be had with developments with mixed income levels in identical units, which I think is what is being proposed here. But we need to displace as few as possible, and as Commissioner Bass mentioned, a phased approach, keeping as many on site as possible, moving them just short distances as necessary. I was also wondering if maybe we could have more than 2 phases, not to change the plan, but if we needed more housing in the area, more people and families wanted to stay, is that a possibility? I am a strong advocate of home ownership and encourage the city to work hard to create more opportunities for all income levels, which you do not currently have with our affordability regulations. As a cooperative owner myself, there is great power when residents have ownership and decision-making power to keep their community thriving. And I think this project needs to be a collaborative effort between development and residents to create a solution. So I do think that the residents do have a great voice here and need to be front and center to make sure that what they want is provided, while at the same time making sure that we can expand affordable housing and create a safe environment with a good sense of community still there.
Okay, Mr. Jordan, I saw your hand up. Was there something you wanted to add before we?
Yeah, I wanted to try to, it was really to address something that Commissioner Wade indicated. So the agreement was, we will build first before we move anyone. That agreement has been broken. Okay, second, related to the right to return. For a resident, the ability to return is more guaranteed when you talk about the location of the replacement units, right? Right now, there are only, I believe, 57 replacement units on the table for 147 or 170, depending on where you count the number, right? So we already have a gap in replacement units. You can't execute it because there's a gap. The only way the gap is filled is when and if Bruce Monroe comes about, and all of that is outside of the reasonable, what I would call a reasonable timeline, right? 10, 12 years in order to meet the goals is a complete failure. That's not what this was about. And related to that, when the development team was selected, one of the criteria was that the development team had sites under its control. We chose to award it to a development team, and I supported that particular development team being awarded. We didn't know at that time that they didn't have units, because the assumption was everybody had units, because when we had the community meeting, we asked, do you have enough Bill First units secured to move this project forward? And we were told they did. We found out later they did not. But that was one of the main, or a key selection point for the development team. So for the development team to cop out and point to the housing authority, when that is their responsibility as well. And then my last thing is with the cooperatives. Has anyone spoken to the city about tools to finance and make cooperatives about this? Do we have anything in writing where anybody said, look, tell me about this option. What would it take? What tools are available? Will the city do this? Has that question even been asked to someone on DMPED's side?
I see Tanya coming back online. I'll let her answer that question. Ms. Jackson.
All of you guys know that I'm unapologetically pro-cooperative, having developed many and living in one in the ward right now. It's one of the things that I really believe in as a core way of actually preserving the existing community in this ward in particular, but in the city in general. I believe in co-ops. I believe in cooperative economics. I believe that they are an important tool for people to access a totally different level of power in their community. I don't know that that question has been asked, but I'm 100% willing to ask it in depth. I'm willing to have a deep level exploration and conversation. And William, you know that what that means when I say that. William and Ms. High both know that that means I will ask everybody that I can even think to ask, but I also will have tons of follow-up questions. So I'm committed to actually following up on that and chasing that down with both the development team and with DMPED, and also looking for some precedent on the city side to see if that's a possibility that we can get to. Because one of the things that I know from my conversations with Ms. High in particular is that the co-op is one of the things that's really important to her. And it's one of the things that the council member and I have both discussed is something that we would love to see happen at Park Morton. So I have no problem following up on that on behalf of the Park Morton residents and on behalf of Ms. High. And I'm also willing to have meetings with you, Ms. High, and whomever else you'd like for me to meet with to discuss it more in depth and try to make connections for you about it.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Ms. Jackson. It's important to me too. So even if we can't do a co-op in one of these phases, I'd really like us to explore this as an ANC, because I think we simply need more housing in our neighborhood. I do have a question though, and I'm hoping to get us out of here by 9 o'clock if I can. But one of the things that the ANC has to consider this month is the extension of the Bruce Monroe site. And given that that property is down the block, I'm going to ask Mr. Jordan and Ms. High, why shouldn't we just support continuing on with that extension, given that it would not impact what you're talking about up here? Mr. Jordan or Ms. High, any on the extension? Sorry, yeah, sorry. Again, specific to the extension.
Please. Okay, I mean, I don't. What our position is that we want to be resident council entity, want to be on the deal. We want to be in the deal. So we want conditional support. We want it conditional to some of our demands, right? So this is an opportunity to place new conditions on this process that strengthens the hand of residents. So it's not that we would be against an extension. What we want is conditions placed in the extension that provide some teeth to the concerns that residents have faced and bring some sort of reparations for the harm that has been done. I mean, if this was a legal case, harm has been done. The failure to execute this project, harm has been done. Half the residents are gone. The ship has sailed on displacement, really. What we're talking about is some Band-Aid on displacement. And I want to say this, for residents to want to come back, we have to create something that gives them an incentive to come back, you know, to keep the deal where it was and say, come back, or to stay on the property. We're going to fix up one of the units over there. What kind of incentive is that? At this point, we should be making it worth the residents' while to stay, not just say, okay, well, you can stay over there and we'll fix it up a little bit. I mean, that ship has sailed a long time ago. It really should be a resident should be, I really, 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 really want to come back because this project has so many opportunities that I will never get anywhere else. That's what we should be doing at this point.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any commissioners that had any? Oh, go, Ms. Hyde. Did you want to? No, go ahead if you're ready, and then we'll go to
Yes,
Commissioner.
I'm ready. I'm sorry. I was eating when you called upon me. I'm sorry about that. To piggyback off of Mr. Jordan, yes, and to also piggyback off of Mr. Gould earlier in the conversation, some have made the choice to move because conditions here have deteriorated so badly that they are choosing to leave. Some are hanging on by a thread. Now, to piggyback off of Mr. Jordan, to just slap a Band-Aid on it is an insult to injury. We don't want to delay the project any longer than it needs to be because we have waited 13 years on it. However, we do need the opportunity to be able to have a foothold in our community. We need the opportunity for equity, digital and community equity, small business development. We need opportunities for self-sufficiency in our community because there are people in our community that do work. They just don't make as much as everybody else. We need opportunities, and we shouldn't always have to slap somebody in a program to move them towards self-sufficiency because some people are well and capable of doing that themselves. Just give them the opportunity to work and save their own money. It shouldn't be at every entity that's involved in this project needs to be in every aspect of that resident's life. You don't need to have, you know, every bit of their business for them to be able to move forward. So, in moving this development forward, we have to link the chain. We have to work together. And in order to do that, you have to include the residents' representation. Because if you are leaving out their representation and you're working with them and those who rely on their representation say, well, what does Ms. High say? What does Ms. High and her team say? And you all tell a lie and it gets back to me, I'm gonna call you out on it. You know I will. And then when it gets back to you and you're like trying to fumble and clean up the mess, then it only makes you look bad because now you have to produce, you know, documentation and all of this stuff to try to cover your trail. It's best to just tell the truth when you're working with me. Let's work together for
Thank you.
And the residents. Thank you.
No problem. Commissioner Miller, you had your hand raised, so I will give you an opportunity.
Gosh, you always make me come after it's really smart people. I just want to throw out, I don't think this resolution is the end of this conversation, no matter what we pass and no matter where we go after this. I think there are a lot of next steps that we need to do and that we need to follow up and that we need to support. I raised my hand because I was so excited about Miss Jackson's comments about co-ops, because I don't want to limit that conversation to just Park Morton. And what I'm hearing from you, Miss Jackson, and what I'm really going to hold you to it is that you are going to throw the weight of the council member's office behind those opportunities, not just for whether or not we can do it at this location, whether or not the developers can make it work, and whether or not we can put it in the deal, but making sure that we see some kind of cooperative development in our ward and for our community to offset. And as Mr. Jordan, as Ms. High said, not to slap a Band-Aid on it, but to really fix the harm that has been done and really to create incentives to come back. And we need to look beyond what we're just talking about in this phase 1 site. And I hope that, again, I was really excited about your comments, that you'll really help us in that effort and also help all the residents at Park Morton with this effort, even beyond what we might be able to do within this small sphere. If that's whatever is achievable, let's look past that. I know Mr. Jordan has also talked about let's be innovative. And so I think based on what you said, I really want to applaud and thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
I hold you to it, and it's recorded.
Ms. Jackson, you came online. Did you want to say something else?
I mean, Christine doesn't really know anything about my track record on this, but yeah, sure, you can hold me to it. Thanks.
Okay, any other commissioners? Because otherwise I think we are coming to a close. Okay, well, I really appreciate everyone's time. Again, I think this was, at least I hope everyone felt that this was helpful and it got a lot of your questions answered. Aspasia, I think, and Mr. Gould, I think there were a few things you were going to try to get to us. So please do that. If anyone who's been watching has any comments, feel free to email us. Obviously, a resolution is going to come, to the committee. Not to the committee. A resolution is going to come to the ANC here in October, specifically on the Park Morton Equity Plan, and then something definitely on the extension of the Bruce Monroe site. So those will be two things that we know we have to tackle at the next meeting. Ms. High, was there something you wanted to say to close us out?
I thank you all so much for taking the time, and I appreciate you all. Thank you so much.
Michael, I think the only thing you asked of the development was the unit sizes, which I already sent you, so you should feel free to share. If there is anything else, I believe the other stuff were from Andre, but if there is anything else, let us know.
Okay, no problem. And I will probably watch this a couple of times through, so if I see something that we didn't get from you guys, I will go back to it. So thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good
night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night, Dottie.